Welcome everyone to Learn Analytics podcast. So today we have a pretty special guest with us, Brian. He spent some time doing, very, very big companies, including Google, Dropbox, as well as DoorDash. He spent some time in each of these companies, and we will talk about his experience and advice overall. How are you, Brian?
Great. How's it
Good.
going? Yeah,
I like the background.
thanks. Yeah, it's a cafe over in Boston, I think. It's one called like Tate, which is like just like very white, like very clean feel, as along with like a little of a rustic feel as well. So
Nice.
it's a great place to work.
Did you ever work there?
Yeah, actually, I don't think I've actually worked at this location, but like we had 1 year near where we lived, and hop over. That's like definitely one on the regular circuit.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and really how you got into data analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Brian. I'm a product manager for our data platform team over at DoorDash. I've been at DoorDash for, I would say, almost 4 years now. Had the opportunity to join when it was significantly smaller than it is today. But in our data platform, I joined as part of our data, as a part of our BizOps team, for eventually like trying to manage our data platform. And it went from one engineer to several engineers, and now we have like a large team of 4 pillars, over 20 people, of experimentation platform, a machine learning platform, a real-time streaming platform, as well as the core data warehousing, which is like what I started out with, which is like the transformations, the data warehousing, and all of that. And that's what I'm doing today.
Got it. So how was I guess maybe we could talk more about like your journey to these different companies. Did you study data yourself, or like what was your background like?
Yeah, well, I don't think data was a thing to study back in. I graduated college around 2012. I don't think like data was really a field at the time. Even now, it's like kind of like people who go into these spaces come from like different engineering disciplines, different math or business disciplines. I personally studied chemical engineering. I picked it because it was like, oh, look, let's stack rank the highest earning potential on all those like US news lists. And in high school, I'd enjoy chemistry. I was like, I don't enjoy, I don't know if I want to like be holed up in a lab for the rest of my life. So like the engineering part, the kind of mishmash of the two had appealed to me. I'd done that over in Berkeley, so in the Bay Area. And I graduated, I wanted to stay in the Bay Area. And like California is not ultimately like a great place for manufacturing or chemical processing. A lot of that's like in other areas of the US or outside of the country. And so took that opportunity to like try something else, and moved into kind of just like an analytics job over at Google. And that was good. It was really cool. It was like, I had started out like, since it wasn't really a domain that like I had studied in school. I started out as like a contractor, had worked on the team that did something around tagging books and magazines in order for them to optimize their ML algorithms. And ironically, like this was back in, I think, 2013. And that's kind of really similar to what some companies are doing now, like Scale AI and all those like ML tagging companies. But Google has been doing that for a really long time, kind of just for their own internal processes. So there, yeah.
The funny thing is I also started a job that way too, but at Facebook. So
Yeah. I mean, it's like analytics is needed across like you need your centralized analytics, and then you need like your analytics for like another like sub team, and then the sub team of the sub team needs analytics. And so like ultimately there's like places where analytics is needed like across all sorts of organizations, right? And that's where we landed, it looks like. But yeah, with that, like a lot of the work was around operations. How do we like make sure the number of tagging per day, per person, kind of like how do we make that faster? How do we make like operational adjustments to make the process more steady and predictable, and just like better.
Mm.
Um, Managed to like take that over to Dropbox, which was like my first job in San Francisco. This was previously was in the South Bay. Took this opportunity to move to the city,
Mhm.
and there worked on our customer support operations team.
Mm.
Similar, like I guess like similar kind of like work. It was like operational. How do we improve these processes, but in a different domain, which in this
Mm.
case was customer service,
Right.
which is ultimately unbelievably interesting and complex challenge because customer service has to basically understand the entirety of the product that your company is providing and be able to provide like help to the different customers, right?
Mm. Got
So
it.
it's like in Dropbox, we had core Dropbox for business, people having problems with the mobile app, people having problems with this kind of file, that kind of file, with administration, with like losing their files, basically everything across the entire gamut. And over there, it was kind of cool. We spent a mix. Some of our time was actually even spent like just doing tickets to see like what types of problem people had.
Mm.
But ultimately, it was like trying to do analytics to both see like what whether we were operating effectively, but also like the different types of problems that people had, and seeing if we could like build certain types of dashboards to go back to the product teams and say these are the types of problems people are having. These are the type of things that we want to start looking at. These are kind of like these are the feedback loops that are necessary for us to like continue improving our product.
Mm.
Which is, and yeah, that helped like learn a lot more about the product. But also one thing that I did at Dropbox was like it also like helped me be much more familiar with our internal data tooling.
Mm.
Right around that time was the Hadoop Hive era,
Mhm.
and like a lot of these, I think Facebook came up with like the Hadoop Hive. Yahoo, Google came up with like MapReduce. Facebook came up with like Hive, I guess, in like 2007, 8, and
Mhm.
then like kind of like this big data was still not like a word that people think is stupid. And so
Do you
at
want to
that time,
maybe before that, do you want to explain very high level what Hadoop or Hive is in the case some of the viewers don't know?
oh yeah, absolutely. Hadoop is an ecosystem that's exists to like store and process unbelievably large amounts of unstructured data. It's like the next evolution, an open evolution from the data warehousing and basically the way that people stored business data in the years before then. So from like ever since the beginning of the database in like the 1970s when computers started up until like the early 2000s, things have been stored in like very like SQL databases and like a lot of like BI tools. And Hadoop Hive was a complete new innovation that allowed us to like use cheap parallel computers to like process, I don't know, petabytes of data. I think that's pretty much where like if you look at the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, they're the first that had to process petabytes of data. But
Mhm.
then every other web company that came after it realized it also had to process
Mhm.
maybe like a tenth of a Google and Facebook, a hundredth of them. But that also ended up into like terabytes, hundreds of terabytes, or even petabytes, which is what we had over at Dropbox.
Got it. Got it. Cool, cool, cool. So did you I guess for both of those positions, like was data fairly easy to access? You know, like was it like you like what type of tools did you use to access the data? Maybe a little bit about like is it SQL or like different other things or
Yeah, definitely.
there.
In the first job, data was unbelievably difficult to access. Actually, what we did was we had a series of interfaces. For on the engineering side, we actually just ended up like copy pasting a lot from our like a lot of our internal tools to populate manually enter data sets of like people's performance and how like this performance translated to what was actually happening on our internal systems.
Mhm.
And a mix of also like user entered information. So it was like we built kind of this thing on Google Sheets. They didn't allow Excel because it was Google coming up with a competitor. Built this entirely very elaborate dashboards on Google Sheets. Actually, I learned about the query functionality there. So apparently, you can do SQL inside Google Sheets if you like equals query, select your range, and then blah 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 SQL. Um, and that was actually my first exposure to SQL, ironically. Really fun one. But we ultimately built like an ecosystem of dashboards using that.
Mm,
Dropbox is like completely different. I think one of the modern web companies with like these modern open warehouses. We had access to a lot of like the behavioral data of our customers. It was pretty open access. They trusted their employees with being able to kind of go like look at both the post transformation and the pre transformation data and kind of just like explore and see what was useful. And we needed that for customer support. That was the only way we could really figure out kind of like who our users were, what kind of users had what kind of problems.
mhm.
But it also like allowed you to explore kind of domains that were slightly outside of kind of exactly what you're looking for, but like stuff that helped enrich your understanding of the business.
Got it. Got it. So sound like your first role at data was harder to get versus
Mm-hmm.
the Dropbox culture. Got it. And then what I guess what led you to DoorDash then?
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh, so I think like the Dropbox part two is what led me to DoorDash. So half of my time there had been spent in the support team, but then I love like creating like data transformations. As weird as that sounds, like engaging with our data pipeline ecosystem, trying to make things efficient. Seeing kind of like I kept writing the same query and trying to like kind of adjust the data so that you could create like some kind of ETL job, which Dropbox allowed us to do pretty easily, to just like make queries process more efficiently, make data more available more earlier in the day for kind of like the managers on our team and et cetera. So like became a power user of the tool. At one time, I think I wrote the most queries in the whole company, something ridiculous like that. Maybe just spamming queries, just like probably the real reason why I was on there. But yeah, after that, like that gave me the opportunity to like engage more with the engineering team themselves, the team that was behind making sure that this all worked. And got a lot of friends, like made a lot of friendships on that team, and ultimately had the opportunity to join the team as a product specialist.
mm,
Um,
got
so
it.
like as a power user, then you help the team that's building the thing with the other users,
Mhm.
and find out kind of like what's important and what's not. Um, and that was an opportunity to kind of like eventually make my move to like being like a product manager today,
Mm,
thinking about the customer, thinking about what they need, thinking about the features and how to actually like develop those features, to make the internal like analytics process better for them.
got it. Got it. Yeah. Maybe we could dive a little bit deeper on that part. I think previously we chatted like what exactly I think we talked about you build tools, right? Or you
Mm-hmm.
about tools as products for internal stakeholders at DoorDash. Or
Yeah, yeah. As I said earlier, we have like four pillars. Used to focus a lot on the ETL and data warehousing one. So it's a mix of like building and buying tools. So ultimately, like our team was in charge of maintaining an ecosystem that allowed people to use data. So like in the first few years, in this data warehouse, data kind of like core data infrastructure team, um, we previously had used Redshift. We moved to Snowflake, and we basically provided an interface for other business users inside the company to access data, whether that be buying a charting tool. We use Chartio right now,
mm,
alongside Tableau and Mode. So like a series, like an ecosystem of charting tools that enable people to build dashboards, as well as an ecosystem of like auxiliary functions like ad hoc SQL. We're big users of numeracy, which had eventually gotten bought out by Snowflake,
mm,
um, as their only acquisition, their first acquisition. I think they've acquired something after that. As well as then like creating interfaces for how people can create transformations. So like everyone's pretty smart, they're pretty savvy, able to create like transformations being like stored procedures or kind of just like scheduled jobs, being able to do that to make their processing more efficient. So like depending on how we thought of our customers as like different levels of savviness, I guess early on,
mm,
and created kind of like different sets of I guess like access points and ways that they could get data that was useful for each of them.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. Cool. 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 So I guess maybe we could talk about maybe take it to different levels. So I guess your background is really how you started in chemistry, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
from different job experiences, it led you to sort of the data product manager role, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess my thing is like for do you see that being a conventional path? Like what's your thoughts to maybe even thinking about like people who are similar that you know who work in this role itself, right? Did they study data or studied or did a master's or what did they do? Like other product managers who end up in the data world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll go from the first one of like, what did my peers end up doing, and also then from the other way around, like, what are
Yeah.
the type of people who become, I guess, like product managers or like product managers in the data space. Um, I would say in for chemical engineering, I think like it was like a third, a third, a third. I think coming out of school, where a third of the people went on to do PhDs, which is like they're unbelievably brilliant, skilled people. Chemical engineering is like one of the hardest fields. I think like one of the lowest GPAs or something on average.
Mm,
In Berkeley and as well as like other schools as well. And so they like these guys love it. Just like go on to some of the top schools in the nation to continue kind of pursuing chemical engineering research. That would be either in like quantum stuff, like solar, nano stuff. I guess like and other things there.
mhm,
Another third probably went to like industry. So I know I said there wasn't that much industry in California, but there's some. There's like some refinery up in Richmond. There's a Valero down in Southern California. That's like two, and those are the only two. But you can work there. And there's also like the places people work where either like big recruiters like Procter and Gamble, or and then like there's a lot of opportunity in the oil fields and like I would guess in the South as well, or like up north in Canada or Alaska. So like there about a third of the people went on to work in industry in the chemical space, where that involved just like making sure that chemical engineering is like I explain it as like chemistry, but making sure it doesn't blow up at a large scale. So like it's when you mix something and it gets a little hot, it's fine. But if you mix like tons of it together, it gets really hot, right? And you need to make sure that like stuff like all works out and is energy efficient. So that's what they went off to do. Make your, I don't know, make your Cloroxes and make your oils.
got it.
Um, and then another third, I think, like went off and did random stuff. And I'm in one of those. So some of them went to consulting, some of them go into banking. You hear a lot. That's a pretty common story. Somebody in an
Is
engineering
it is
field
it
goes
is
into
it
that.
more like I guess adding to that, is it more like people you see people who end up being product managers or data product managers, like did they have a quantitative background to begin with, like
Yeah. So taking the other for the other part of the question, I think data product right now is more on the technical side right now. But I would say probably yes. It's like ultimately, I imagine people who go into infrastructure, it's kind of right now kind of like bundled in the infrastructure space. People go into infrastructure have like a curiosity around kind of like the maths and science, like kind of like the technical stuff. They love to nerd out on that.
mm,
Not a generalized. I think that's like a pretty broad generalization. So there's definitely people from all sorts of backgrounds or all sorts of interests um, that do end up in this field, but it's relatively small. I don't know if I have great examples for you. The few I know are like did like CS in undergrad and went to be product managers, or like did some random thing.
mhm. Got it, yeah. Maybe instead of that, like what do you think are skills, like if people want to go into this, like what are like both like quantitative skills or qualitative skills you think that makes a product manager in this space successful?
Yeah. to preface this, there's like two new hot things going on in the data product space where there's like product managers for data products, and then there's
Mm,
like there's like a new thing that's starting to come up, which is like a product manager who make sure that like data is easily accessible for the other people in the organization, or like certain data sets are easily accessible for people.
mm,
um Let me think. I would say that the commonality is that like people just love, like, I guess, data, which is like a little bit is a little bit is, I guess, like a little bit obvious, but it's like I think the people who like it are probably the similar as like other people we've talked to. It's like why people go into analytics in the first place, because they're interested in kind of like the data, the kind of like the insights you can get out of it, and ultimately how we can enable that for everybody else in the organization.
mm,
um, I think chemical engineering is like weirdly, it shares a lot of terminology with data engineering. um, Data engineering kind of just stole them. Like you hear a lot about data pipelines or batch processing. um, yeah, that just comes from like an oil pipeline or like a big vat that you're stirring like chemicals in. Those are pretty much like they borrow the terminology. They kind of have similar imagery. Ultimately, you don't have a lot of the same properties, but like just the thinking of like thinking about things in like a very process oriented manner, like this thing goes into that thing and that thing goes into that thing,
mm.
um, is something that got me into it. I don't know if that's what gets other data product managers into it.
Got it. Got it. Um, what about, I guess, when you create a product, right? Like you said, for internal stakeholders, how does that, like, at least on a high level, how does that look like? Um,
Yeah. So recently, one thing we've been working on is this thing we call Curie, which is our experiment analysis tool. And all product comes from some kind of like pain point. And that's kind of like very cliche, but it really does. It's like somebody needs something, somebody that can't do something, somebody's trying to do something, but it like really sucks to do that.
mhm,
And they benefit from something that helps them do that better.
mhm,
Um, so in this case, we create an experiment analysis tool. The pain point for kind of internal analysts was that they're analyzing experiments by hand.
mhm,
It's a time-consuming process, very error-prone. Lots of gotchas in this process, where you try to like make sure that you got the right data to run your t-test, and then you make sure that like there's the same number of people in control and treatment, that there's like not the same person in both control and treatment, and that like the identities are unique, and like there's no kind of like other factors, and that the priors are the same. There's a number of checks that you have to do to make sure experiment analysis goes well.
mhm,
And what we want to do is kind of like build a product that makes this easier. Or build an analysis product where you press a few buttons, you select the experiments that you ran, a couple of the metrics that you're looking for, and be able to kind of come up, like it'll just run all those tests for you. It'll check whether whether there's bucket switching, whether there's like imbalanced buckets, and all of these things I just mentioned. Kind of do all these things, but like ultimately the basest problems are make it not error prone. So have you trust the information, make it more convenient, like faster and less time consuming, and also make it accessible to people who might not have known how to do experiment analysis
mhm,
before. They might have generally understand that like if I put a red button and a blue button and like somebody presses this one and it's statistically significant, they might understand that, and they might understand like general concept of experimentation, but not actually be able to run the tests themselves, not able to spin up R, Python, download data from SQL, do all of that.
mhm,
Having a tool enables them to do that. And so like those are three completely different problems, and like we have to tackle each of them separately, right? um, we could have chosen to tackle something that like makes the power users more effective. We could have chosen something that is a utility that makes you just press a button, and as you're running experiment analysis just does all the checks for you. Or we can build something that's like an end-to-end platform that makes it really easy to press a button, to do the analysis, but might have trade-offs around like it's less flexible. You're not allowed, you can't really see much more what's inside. You might not be able to analyze like metrics that aren't supported. So like those were the trade-offs we made. We're making right now as we think about this product. And we're trying to like, we've slowly created a base product that satisfies the core use cases and kind of branching out into the different personas to, I guess, like to make the experience better for each of them. Even, or like now one of the big ones is you think about all the people running experiments, but what about the people who are viewing experiments? The people like your business partners. If I'm an analyst in our company, say the DashPass team, trying to make DashPass better, I'm not the only person looking at it. I need to show this to my product manager. I need to show this to my engineers. I need to show this to my marketing person. I need to show this to like the operations people. And like as an experimentation platform, it's our prerogative, I guess, to make that experience better for the people they're showing it to as well.
Got it. So would you say like being a sort of data product manager, like this is a good example of like a product that you have to own sort of the entire roadmap, right? Like really understanding this is the pain point, what I need to design for, what needs to go there, right? Work with how to get this created.
Yeah, exactly. And then you come up with some mocks, you kind of come up with what it looks like. If you have a design resource, try to work with that, or try to like scrape up some like initial designs yourself, and like work with the engineers to figure out what technically is actually required to make this happen. It's always not that clean. Obviously, it's like it always starts from some kind of like spits and starts, or like some technical people are like, oh, this is so frustrating. Like we can definitely make something better. They create this one piece here, other people create another piece there. And like, sometimes it doesn't, it sometimes just starts by like opportunistically taking a few pieces that people have like taken stabs at to make a product out of it and kind of turn it into a cohesive ecosystem.
Got it. I guess like in this role or being, data product manager, like creating these products, like what's like the most, joy that you get out of it? And like, what's the most frustrating or pain point you ever had?
Yeah. I think like, it's like, ultimately as a product manager, I think like the most joy is just like talking to people, and understanding kind of like talking to people in the very beginning, kind of really getting understanding of like what sucks for them. And then eventually like watching their progression throughout the process, and like watching people who like had this like pain point and like ultimately were actually like feel much better because like they're able to do something that they couldn't do before. That's the most important. It's like, it's ultimately all about the people, right? Also great is watching your numbers go up, like setting some metrics, setting some targets around like MAUs, weekly active users, like engagement scores, like frequency of engagement, feature engagement, all of these things. Ironically, it's like as a data product, you still have to use other data products to like do these things. And just like seeing kind of like the engineering work, the design, like kind of your entire product ecosystem create something that people actually use.
Got it. Second question, the frustrated pain point.
Oh yes. Shoot. The pain points. One real problem that's always really hard is convincing people to use your thing. And especially I think like this is frustrating because it should be a hard problem, which is like sometimes you have the pressure to like it's like you never have time to make something absolutely perfect. So you're trying to like thread the needle of like getting just enough of what people need so that what you have is better than what they're doing right now. And you're operating in a world with imperfect information, and the painful part is really like just like when you're nearly there, you're trying to get more people to use your thing. Sometimes it's a huge grind. It's a huge grind to talk to people, not in a research sense, but trying to like just get people to use their thing, selling internally. It's enjoyable, but kind of like a grind at the same time.
So a lot of times you have to actually, you created this, but you have to get them to use it, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. Otherwise you failed.
Champion and pitch. you know?
Yeah, and you can go out and like do like road shows. You can go out and like send emails and kind of like walk up to people like you trust. You can try to create a flywheel concept that involves like, if this person views it and another partner views it and they want to get their other teams to use it, then more people will use it, and it kind of like flywheels. But like all this like growth hacking stuff, I hate growth hacking, by the way. But I realize it's actually really like a lot of the concepts there around growth are actually really valuable.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. To wrap it up, I usually ask this question to the guesses. If really want to get your thoughts on what is one piece of advice that you might have for folks who are trying to get into, data or analytics, or even, being a data product manager. What's one piece of advice?
Yeah, I think I think to me, like the one thing that helped me the most. Okay, I'll give you two because I just realized I had another one. But the first one I was gonna say was like know where your food comes from, or know where data comes from in this case. And like I think the people who have succeeded the most, the people who I enjoy working with the most, are the people who are really thoughtful about kind of like understanding where their data comes from, what could go wrong with it, why it is what it is, and then being very rigorous about like making sure that the work that they do is kind of like well thought out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. And the second one is a little stupid, is a silly one. It's just like asking questions helped me a lot. It's like like nobody's gonna like make you look bad for asking questions. Obviously you have to be smart, you have to like actually think about the questions you're asking, but like when you're actually thoughtful, when you actually have that feedback loop of you ask a question, something kind of makes sense but another piece doesn't, doing some follow-ups, doing some reading, and then kind of like going back and more, people love to help. I didn't know anything about engineering early on, but like all of it just came from asking questions. A lot of it was my friends too, so like if like ultimately that's what makes me comfortable. It's like, oh, it's just like, yeah, how does this work, how does that work, like why does this thing do that? But that's pretty much like how I've learned nearly everything, and it's helped a lot. And
Oh,
so don't be scared to ask questions, I guess, is like the second piece.
yeah, buy one get one free.
Exactly.
No, but that's a awesome advice, and it's really refreshing, right? A lot of times, like, you need to understand what this data is and really where it is coming from. Like, what systems is it really driving it from,
Hmm.
and does the data even make sense, right? Like a lot of times. Um,
Yeah,
your second
absolutely.
point as well. Like if no one asks questions, no one's actually thinking what they're doing, or even thinking what is there to do. What is the right problem to solve, right? What's the right pain point? Like, yeah, all things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks for having you, definitely, on this podcast. So,
Absolutely, thanks so much for having me here. It was a pleasure talking.
yeah. All right. Have a good one.
Oh, bye bye.
Take care.